Elon Musk estimated that he can cut $1 trillion from the federal spending each year. And while I was very skeptical about that, I am now actually going, okay, I can actually see it now. This might actually be possible. Friends, we're going to talk about how this might actually be possible. We're going to talk about one of the biggest chunks of money that could be cut soon. And it's $500 billion per year. This is a major, major waste, fraud, and abuse that we need to talk about. And it is giving us some hope that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. All right, friends, let's jump into it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade. And these are the things the mainstream media will not tell you. They're out there telling you that Elon Musk and Doge are doing some sort of media coup, or doing some sort of coup against the government. They're trying to take over, when in fact what they're trying to do is hold the government accountable and to cut federal spending. And who better to do that than the person who made the largest income tax payment ever to the U.S. federal government, and that is Elon Musk. And if you don't doubt that, go look it up. He made the largest one-time payment to the federal government for income tax that anyone has ever written. I know a lot of people are like, oh, he doesn't pay any federal income tax. Yeah, he paid a lot. He paid a lot. And now he wants to actually make sure that the federal government's not wasting his money. Gee, actually seems kind of reasonable when you think about it. All right, this morning we talked about $100 billion per year that is coming out of Social Security and going to people who do not have Social Security numbers, which under United States law is an impossibility. That can't happen. You have to have a Social Security number because you have to have a Social Security number to pay into it, and you have to pay into it in order to be qualified to receive it. Seems pretty straightforward, and yet somehow $100 billion, or about 7% of all payments in the Social Security system, are going to people who don't have Social Security numbers. Now there's a whole other set that are going to people with temporary Social Security numbers. I don't even know what that means, but that sounds like it could be legitimate in certain circumstances. I don't know. Maybe that's for foreigners. Maybe it's referring to the foreigner ID code. Like, so if somebody comes from the UK or something like that, and they need to file taxes with the US government, they can't get a Social Security number because they're a citizen of the UK, unless they get dual citizenship. So they can't get a Social Security number, so they have to get like this code so they can work here and pay income taxes, right? Federal Employment Identification Number, FEIN, that's what it is, I think. Anyway, so maybe the temporary Social Security number is actually legitimate. We'll probably find out about that. And the other thing that they definitely need to do is check how many of these payments are going to two separate accounts for one Social Security number, or three separate accounts, or five separate accounts, or 20 separate accounts. That's a question we're going to ask. But we're going to talk about this $500 billion in illegal payments being paid out by the U.S. Treasury Department. Well, actually, it's $516 billion, which, when you consider the $40 or $50 billion that the USAID was sending out, suddenly $16 billion doesn't sound like such a small number, which is the approximate cost of building a brand new nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. I believe the last one cost like $20 billion or something like that, Ford-class carrier. But it's in the ballpark. You could basically build a discount Ford-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. So I shouldn't round too much when we're talking about numbers this stinking big. But when I say illegal payments, first off, let me point this out. This wasn't Doge that came up with this. This is not the Department of Government Efficiency. In fact, it's not even Donald Trump and his administration that came up with this number. It was actually the Congressional Budget Office that came up with this number. And what is it referring to? It's referring to agencies, projects, and other slush funds or whatever that were appropriated at some point by Congress to get funding. but that funding has expired. Some of these projects, they expired 40 years ago, and yet somehow they're still getting paid out by the Treasury Department. Can you imagine if you were working for a federal agency or a department that no longer was funded by the budget that's passed by Congress or the continuing resolutions, but somehow your agency or department still exists and still gets paid? Can you see how confusing that might be? That you can have $516 billion worth of spending that isn't even authorized. Does that sound like an easy cut to you? I think most of us would say that's a legitimate and easy cut. You should cut all of those agencies, you should cut all of that spending. If Congress hasn't authorized it, then there shouldn't be money going to it. Now there's a little bit of a wrinkle here. Obama appointed judge in, of course, Manhattan, because that's where all these Obama appointed judges are always when they start meddling with the Republican administrations, particularly Trump administrations. He has blocked temporarily, they're always temporarily, Doge and others from accessing financial data at the Treasury Department, including personal information, but other financial information too. But basically what it does is it stops Trump, President Trump, and Secretary Besant, who's the Treasury Secretary, from granting access to the records to any political appointees or anyone that's not part of that department. Now, imagine you were charged with dispersing the money for a company, and nobody was allowed to see where the money was going from except people from your department. How exactly would an audit proceed? If auditors aren't allowed to see where you're sending money or who you're sending the money to, kind of makes an audit impossible, doesn't it? And that's the kind of situation we have set up here. This is a massive judicial overreach. Honestly, my recommendation, not a lawyer, accountant, accountant by trade, I would suggest that the Trump administration just ignore. And if people in the Treasury Department try to block Doge appointees or others from accessing that information, that he send in soldiers or FBI or somebody, armed people from the federal government, send them in to forcibly access those systems. Because this is one of those situations where we can't have judges out there determining that no one who's politically appointed, who is elected essentially, we elect the president and the vice president, and they appoint all of the political appointees to implement what we elected them to do. But if they're not allowed to even run the federal government, the executive branch, and the agencies below them, if they can't access information to even see what's going on, to see if what they're saying is being implemented or if it's not being implemented, this is an extremely serious situation. And Trump should not allow this to happen. That's not my legal advice. I don't have a law degree. But from my understanding of this, this is a judicial overreach. And hopefully Trump flat out ignores or only sort of complies and forces the issue to continue. He's already done this before. I've reported on this before. A couple days ago, I believe it was, they said that a edict by President Trump that went out in a memo form that all grants to nonprofits, businesses, whatever, in the United States need to be frozen until they can be reviewed. Well, a judge struck down that policy that was presented in that memo. And the Trump administration rescinded the memo and then turned around and said, well, the policy is still in effect. Which, I mean, if you read the court order, it doesn't say that the memo is rescinded or the memo is blocked. It says the implementation of the policy is blocked. And the Trump administration says, we're just going to cover our eyes and we're going to ignore what you clearly said. We're going to say it was ambiguous and we're just going to do what we want to do anyway. And you're going to have to try to stop us. Which, at first, you're going to go, that sounds actually kind of illegal and lawless. On the other hand, that's exactly what the Biden administration did again and again and again, and what the Obama administration even did on certain points. Remember how Congress voted for and approved a wall to be constructed? And then the Biden administration just chose to not build the wall. Chose to allow that money just to sit there and not implement. He was legally obligated, and the agencies under him legally obligated to build the wall, but he just chose not to. You can't do that. Well, but he did. And we had judicial court orders where he was told specifically not to do something with the forgiveness of the student loans, right? And he turned around and just did it anyway. Rebranded it, did it again. And it's just like, that's the type of situation where if that's how the game is allowed to be played by one side, well, the Trump administration is saying, well, then we're going to play that way too. These sweeping edicts coming from district judges who freeze everything the federal government is doing across all the states and territories. Just because one district judge says, I think I'm going to lock down the entire federal government from doing X. Well, that is kind of tyrannical when you really look at it. And that is a massive judicial overreach. Now, we've already seen that the Supreme Court has recently started to crack down hard on judges that are doing this type of thing. And what we hopefully will see at some point is a string of impeachments. Now, there's not enough votes in the Senate to actually impeach judges that are doing this kind of thing yet. But if we ever get to a point where they can actually lock in an impeachment majority, then we could actually start impeaching judges for this egregious action. But at the very least, what Donald Trump can do is he can start ignoring these judges, forcing these judges to kick it up the chain of command to the higher courts, and then have those higher courts try to hold Donald Trump accountable. But at that point, they're going to get very easy for the Supreme Court to reach down, grab it, pull it up and go, no, that's overreach. You can't do that. So what we're seeing is Trump is basically trying to set it up on a tee, like a T-ball, for the Supreme Court to knock it out of the park. Here's some of the things that DOGE is trying to implement at the Treasury Department. You tell me if these sound reasonable or unreasonable. 1, demanding all outgoing payments to have a payment category code. Now, they're required by law, congressional law, to have a category code. Now, you can't conduct an audit on a nonprofit business if it doesn't have category codes. It's like you have to give a category to what this payment is going to, right? You have to have a payment. You have accounts, right? If you've ever done a budget or you've done like a business, you have to have all these accounts, right? So that things can be categorized properly for taxes and for other things, right? Well, the federal government is just sending out payments and not even putting it on an account. It's like, is this for defense spending? Is this for the IRS? Is this for boomsticks for IRS agents? who are going to be deployed at the border. Who knows what this is for? So they're required by law to have a payment code for category on there, but they haven't been doing that. So DOGE is like, well, we're going to start implementing where a payment won't go through until you put a category code on it. It needs to have a category code. At least once you put a category code on it, we can then say, is that a legitimate expense approved by that department or whatever? But at this point, we just have payments going through that nobody knows what they are. How do you hold that to account? Number two, they also are legally required to have a comment on them with some sort of rationale of what this payment is for. Are you buying a $300 toilet seat, or are you buying, a $300 monkey wrench? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe this is, some party that you had and you bought $300 worth of balloons. You need to actually tell us what this payment actually is. There needs to be a comment. This isn't saying it has to be a certain kind of comment, just like it has to have a comment on it, or else the payment won't go through. Number three, that the do not pay list, which is also required by congressional law, must actually be implemented. If they're on the do not pay list, you can't pay them. The payment shouldn't go through. Now, on this do not pay list are interesting examples. Organizations that no longer exist. Why are you sending money to organizations that no longer exist? People that no longer exist. People that used to exist, but they don't exist anymore. Known criminals, scammers, and people who have committed crimes that shouldn't be getting paid anymore. Fronts for known terrorist organizations or organizations that are fronting for governments under sanctions. We are sanctioning other countries and organizations, and yet somehow the Treasury Department is still paying the money. If that makes sense to you, you must be in Congress. Or, in this case, in the Treasury Department. Friends, $500 billion could rather quickly be axed because it's unapproved, illegal payments going out. $100 billion of Social Security payments going out to people who don't even have Social Security numbers. They haven't even touched Medicaid and Medicare. When they start looking for fraud and abuse and false payments in there, oh boy, could we see some interesting things happen. What happens if they go after all that free COVID money that was going out? Well, we might see some interesting things happen there too. Is $1 trillion off the federal deficit this year possible? From what I'm seeing here, it's starting to look possible, friends. All right, we may actually pull this off where we actually start getting the deficit down enough that we can actually start growing as an economy to pay off our national debt eventually. It's possible. Who would have thunk it? Takes a billionaire who actually runs businesses and who really hates paying federal income taxes to make it happen. All right, friends, thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.